So it's a real joy to share with you my testimony, my journey of faith with you. To really whisk through the first part of my life, I grew up in a loving Christian family, and it was a real privilege to grow up knowing from an early age that I was loved by God. And I really grew into faith myself in my teenage years and found a relationship for myself through Jesus when I was about 17, and I ended up getting baptised and committing myself to God. And I then went into a gap year performing arts course with the church in Birmingham, and I had to really stand on my own 2 feet in my faith and really felt it was a foundational time in growing in my love with God. And it propelled me into my time at university, where I studied drama at Exeter, and I felt I really thrived and flourished at that time. I felt I had this amazing opportunity to share my faith with those around me, and really grew in that time. And I ended up working with my church the year after, and that was a year of real change. In the Easter time of that year, I ended up feeling something happened quite out of the blue than what I was ever expecting, and I developed severe depression, and it was a deeply dark and painful and hard time of my life. I'd gone from thriving and really enjoying myself at university to suddenly not being able to even write an email. I was confused. I'd never felt this depth of darkness ever felt before. I lost a lot of my memory, and I remember feeling this real guilt and shame that I should have the joy of the Lord, and yet I just didn't care. I just felt this depth, this heaviness that I've never felt before, and it was a really hard time, to a point where I had to end up moving home and be with my parents. And I remember feeling like I'd lost everything. I felt like I'd lost my friends, I'd lost my future, my career, and I was suddenly stuck at home again, and I had failed. And but I remember this one time when I felt all else had gone, where I felt I had nothing left, and I was really being not very kind to my parents in that time, because I just couldn't manage myself, and my parents had just started a business from home, and so it was quite an intense time. And I remember my dad sitting me down one day, and in that time I felt that was it. He was going to send me away. Even though these were the most supportive parents I've known, he was going to send me away, and I had to do everything by myself. And I remember him sitting me down and saying, "Esther, this is really hard for us, and it's really difficult, but we are 100% committed to you, and we're going to stand with you, we're going to walk with you in it and help you through it." And I just remember in that time suddenly realising God's redemptive heart, that he doesn't leave us, he never forsakes us, but he's committed to us, and he loves us in it, and he holds us even when we can't hold ourselves. And that was such a restorative moment, and in those months I felt God really healed me and restored me, and to a point where I ended up moving to Manchester, up to the north, and I ended up being part of a theatre company up there, Christian theatre company, touring. But in the first week I really wanted to move back home again, and also in the first week I wrote my car off. So suddenly I was stuck here in a place I didn't want to be, and I was having to get the bus every morning to my rehearsals. But what was amazing in that time, I really felt God had got me. And in those journeys to my rehearsals, whereas before I may have felt a wariness, a kind of maybe fear, as I was being taken through Wythenshawe, which was one of the biggest council estates in the area, but yet I just suddenly felt that depth of just knowing what those people were going through. God had opened my eyes, he'd given this greater empathy that I'd never felt before. I understood their pain, their darkness, the sorrow they were feeling, their isolation and their loneliness, and I felt God really broke my heart for what breaks him during that time. And I felt in that time that God had really called me and commissioned me to be part of his mission to support the lost and the least. And I ended up moving into a council estate in Manchester as part of a missional community with my church, and I ended up leading the team. I was part of it for 7 years and got to journey with some amazing children and families in that time, and I really felt that God brought beauty out of ashes, that he brought out of a painful and broken and hard time, he brought it for his good and for his glory and for his kingdom. And it reminds me of a verse in Isaiah 61, which says in verse 3, "And provide for those who grieve in Zion, to bestow on them a crown of beauty instead of ashes, the oil of joy instead of mourning, and a garment of praise instead of a spirit of despair. They will be called oaks of righteousness, a planting of the Lord for the display of his splendour. And this just kind of made me so thankful to have gone through that experience, that God, even though it was painful and hard, God broke me and he used it to bring his glory. He used it to bring hope in the darkness. And I pray that wherever you are, however you're feeling, if you're feeling this is a really particularly difficult time, that you may know that God will bring beauty out of ashes and he'll restore it for his kingdom and for his glory and for his good.